Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Shevarim Chatter podcast. On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined by Rabbi Bentzion Ettlinger, who is the author of the Mechaber of the newly published English Sefer, the book called The Shefer, Halachos, Minhagim, and Meseira, published by Mosaic Press, which we'll be discussing in this episode. And he also is the Baal Tekia in Kaladas Yeshurun in Washington Heights for many years. So thank you, Rabbi Bentzion, for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So let's start off. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
My background, my parents were refugees from Germany. My father arrived in the United States prior to the Second World War. My mother was one of the kinder transport children and ended up in the famous Shepherd School under Rabbi Bentzion Grinfeld. And then they both obviously separately came here to the United States. I grew up in Washington Heights. Attended Yeshiva Rabbi Bentzion Hirsch from pre-1A through high school, and after that, it was chus to learn in the Beis Midrash during the tenure of the Novominsker, the then to be Novominsker Rebbe Rabbi Yaakov Perlov, and during that time developed a very close relationship with him. Even more so, I had a very close, was zochet of a very close filial relationship with Rav Shimon Schwab. I was zochet to mishamish him for 25 years. And then following that, I was able to have a very close relationship with Rav Zachari Geli and Zolzain Gezut and Stark, and also have a very close relationship with Rav Meir Tzvi Bergman, who is the Rosh Yeshiva's Rajbi in Bnei Brak.
Okay, so obviously the Sefer here is written on Shefer, and you're a Baal Tekia for many years. So how did you become interested how did you start becoming a Baal Tekia, I guess, because that's kind of connected, and then becoming interested in Shefer to write a full English Sefer on it?
Yeah, that's interesting. I got a Shofar right after my bar mitzvah, actually. My father was a Baal Tekia in a shul in Inwood, the Inwood section of Manhattan, just north of Washington Heights. And I remember going with him and my twin brother with him on Rosh Hashanah. We walked up there to the shul and Hebrew Shofar. And then after our bar mitzvah, my father took us down to Feldheim. Feldheim was then on the Lower East Side and East Broadway. And we went through a whole box of Shofaros that were in the store. And he blew just about every one in the box. And then when he was finished, he said, "This one." And it was a beautiful shofar, and very much like the straight ones with the curved end, the ones made in Europe. It sounded beautiful, and it still sounds beautiful, and that is the one I use primarily today. This is now almost 60 years later. And Baruch Hashem was very matzliach in learning how to blow, and that's how I started.
Okay, so why now? I mean, it's probably not now. You're probably working on this for a while, but why write a Sefer on Shefer? And also, with that, why in English, not in Hebrew?
Well, now is because I had actually over the years I do teaching in schools in the siftas and in high schools, and I've also given lectures in Kolim on Tekias Shofar. And every year I found this is how it started. Every year I found myself looking everything up all over again, and I figured I started taking notes. I started with a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet grew and grew and grew like 500, 600 lines. I showed it to a Rav once, and he said to me, "I can't read this." So then that was shortly before COVID, and COVID set in, and spent a lot of time at home, and I decided to start writing it out, that I could share all my findings and all the Halachos and all the Minhagim, and share that with everybody. So that's how it started. I've been working on the Sefer in earnest before that, but over the last 2.5 years, for the most part, in writing the Sefer. Why in English? Because there's nothing else out there. And I spoke to people who've published Shevarim, who published for ArtScroll, published other places. There's nothing else out there in English. There are Shevarim written in Hebrew, Halachos Shevarim on the topic. Most of them concentrate on one specific aspect. They may concentrate on the kolos. They may concentrate on the length of the kolos. But there's nothing, I didn't find anything that's comprehensive, except for maybe Rabbi Bentzion Ettlinger has a very beautiful Sefer. It's called Shofer Bentzion. His name is Bentzion, obviously, so that's why he called it Shofer Bentzion, which is a bit more comprehensive. But again, it's designed for the Eda Mizrach, and I wanted that something should be available for everybody, not just Eda Mizrach, but also for the Litva Shiyidin, Yeshiva Shiyidin, and all, as I say, all Alec Kreisen in Klal Yisrael. And I felt it was better to write it in English.
Okay, so one more general question before we get into discussing Shofar and different inyanim of Shofar and what the Sefer talks about is, so the Sefer is primarily a halacha Sefer, a back. How would you define, I guess, the Sefer?
It's, I would say, primarily halacha, but it's spiced with agadita. It's spiced with some nice wortlacha divrei Torah that I've heard over the years, and very much salted with, or I wouldn't say salted, but very much spiced with many stories that I've heard and stories that occurred to me over the years in reference to particular halachas, which put an accent on the particular halacha where that story is mentioned.
Okay, so let's start off with more, like you said, the Torah you have in here is just start off with the reasoning for Shofar, and I know you discussed different parts, Tekia and Shevarim, teruah. We'll obviously discuss different parts, but if you want to just, I guess, generally.
Yeah, there's 10. Everybody's familiar with the famous 10 reasons of the Sajigon for the reasons for Tekias Shofar. First of it reminds us of Mount Har Sinai. It reminds us of being on Har Sinai, listening to Tekias of Matan Torah. Also, it's reminiscent of the coronation of a king. The kailos that are blown represent, again, the coronation of the Melech Malachim Lachem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It reminds us of the Beis Hamikdash, the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, and certainly reminds us of Akedas Yitzchak and the ram that was at the point at Akedas Yitzchak. And those are some of the things. But I actually heard something really fascinating today. I'm leveraging something I heard from this morning from Mr. Reisman. Why do we blow shofar? And there are two aspects of Rosh Hashanah. One aspect is din and fear of din. We're standing, Mamish HaKadosh Baruch Hu is judging all of us. Kivnei Maram, before sheep going before they getting marked off through the narrow corral, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu examining each one of us. So it's fear-inducing. On the other hand, there's simcha on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, there's an aspect of simcha as well on Rosh Hashanah. After Tekias Shofar, we go home, we have a Suda, we have a simcha. So there are this dichotomy, these two aspects. So that's Tekias Shofar. Tekias Shofar itself, the shofar is, we're all familiar with the pasuk in Amos, the shofar is blown in the city, the people won't fear. But on the other hand, we find in Yoel, we find Tekias Shofar, B'tzion, Hariu B'har Kachi, Yirguzu, Kol Yoshvei Haaretz, Kiva Yom Hashem. And in davening, in Tehillim, in Peiches, and B'chatzrosos, Kol Shofar, exaltations of happiness. So that's another reason why the shofar, because just like Rosh Hashanah has these two aspects, the shofar as well has these two aspects. I haven't seen that anywhere, but it makes sense. Based, again, leveraging what I heard from Rabbi Reisman this morning, I think that makes sense. Okay.
So actually, the first chapter is actually small. You discuss you have a table of the number of kailas, and you go through the different minhagim and the different structure. I don't know if I want to discuss it now. We can just come back to that soon.
No, we can talk about that now. I found very fascinating that in Guns Kal Yisrael, there's Minhagim and the possibility of blowing from 10 kolos, as a minimal amount is 10 kolos to 200. So how does that work? What is that? So we find that the minimal amount of kolos that that one can hear. Let's say someone is chas v'chalila, someone is in the ICU of a hospital, and blowing shofar is going to cause a ruckus. And if you can get away with it, to blow a minimal amount is 10 kolos. That would be Tekias Shofar, Tekia teruah, Tekias Shofar teruah Tekia, Tekias Shofar Tekia, Tekia teruah Tekia. That would be the absolute minimum amount that you could blow. It's an interesting story with that. The stipler, he was once very unsatisfied with the tekias from Baal Makri that he in a place that he blew. Apparently, very unsatisfied with all the kashrus. So he asked someone to come to his house afterwards to blow, and he didn't want to be matriach the Baal Tekia, so he only had him blow 10 kolos. So that's the absolute minimum amount. Then it grows from there. 30 kolos is under normal circumstances. So 30 is the minimum. You're blowing for a person who doesn't go to shul, can't go to shul, and you go to his house, one would blow 30 kolos. And then it gets really interesting. It becomes 40. Represents, that was the original minhag of the Rif, Rav Amar 40 kolos. That was it. They blew 30 kolos to Tekias Miyushav in the beginning, before Shemoneh Esrei, and then 10 during Shemoneh Esrei. And that's the minhag of the Rishonim. For Malchios, you blow Tekias Shofar teruah Tekia, Shofaros Tekias Shofar Tekia, and for Shofaros Tekia teruah Tekia. That's it. And that was the original minhag of the Rishonim. Eventually, it grew. Some of the Temunim today, and minhag of Badali, they blow 41. The minhag of Rashi also was 41. I have all the haskamos mentioned in the Sefer. The minhag Temani minhag Hadani is 51. It grows to 70, which was the later minhag in Germany called the Stern. Frankfurt only blew 70, and many other kehillas only blew 70, and did not. The 100 it was introduced later. That's all Kabbalah. And Sharath Israel today, the Spanish Portuguese shul in Manhattan, they also right now today they only blow 70. Some Temanim blow 71, and then of course we have the 100 kolos, and again all the haskamos for all these I marked down in the Sefer. It's just too lengthy to go into that at the moment. And then you have in France they do 120, Chabad does 130. Have haskamos for that also. Rav Moshe Sternbuch, that's the famous Rav Moshe Sternbuch in Hamodim B'Zmanim. Talks about 100 to be Mekayim the mitzvah, 165 kolos, and he says a famous line, Yom Teruah Yelachem. So since it's Yom Teruah, spend the day blowing shofar. And then in Tolas Aaron in Yerushalayim, they blow 200, blow 100 kolos, and then after making kiddush, after musaf, after davening, they blow another 100 kolos. So that's you have from 10 all the way to 200. And again,
right.
And that's mentioned in the Sefer, and all the haskamos are there.
Right. This is I think it's 9 pages of tables where you have situation, kailas, source, comment, and you go through it. And so it's a very nice table right at the beginning. Okay, so now we get to tekiah, the actual tekiah. So I talk about the different minhagim of blowing the tekiah, and then the length of the tekiah, we'll discuss it. Now, I want to mention 2 things before I give you that question. First of all, we'll incorporate some actual examples here. We have about tekiah. We will not only discussing it here in the abstract and like the Sefer does, here we can actually blow, so to show what you mean. Obviously, we're not going to go through every single different variation of teruah, but here with tekiah, we can do. And also, I just wanted to mention with the structure of the Sefer, now that we're in the main part of the Sefer, you kind of did it how you have 1, 2, 3, but broken up. So 2, I'm going to read it, for example, just the listeners here, it would be Yerid V'Aliyah B'Tchilas HaKoil, and then that's how you have is the header in italics. Then you have a lowering, then rising at the beginning of the coil, and then you say elucidation. Think listeners may be familiar with the Halachos Sefer in Hebrew, where you have a top, we like have the halacha or the sif, and on the bottom you have the elucidation, the commentary, the notes. So you did it kind of throughout, going direct, but you keep saying the number with the basic halacha, then you have the elucidation broken down. Okay, I just wanted to get that out there to explain how the Sefer works, but now I'll turn it over to you. So the different Minhagim of blowing the tekiah and the length of the tekiah and all that.
And just as a caveat before we start, some of the Minhagim are so again, everything here is sourced. So, even maybe 15 years ago, 20, 30, certainly 100 years ago, 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago, they did not have something called sound bites. And even today, at least not yet, Shevarim are not injected with sound bites, and that would probably make the Sefer books on Yantiv. So a lot of the older Minhagim, which I found, are based on what I've seen in Shevarim, and they're written out in letters, and I've done the same. I've used the same method, for instance, square, the tekiah is like that, and I've written it out. Again, with all the kolos, and quite a number of chapters have all the different kolos. So basically, the most famous tekiah is, of course, the straight one, and they're called the brisket tekiahs, and those are the ones that are straight, no wavering in between. And the famous the Diskin was very makbid, and they say on Rosh Hashanah went through many different balei tekiah in order to make it sure every kol was perfect. However, Rav Hamburger of the Rosh Ashkenaz very clearly in his Sefer, and we've mentioned that also, insists that since the tekiah is a kol simcha, it has to have a connection between. So the way he says that they did it, the old minhag was something like this. You have a jump, a modulation in between the kol. Many people would not be satisfied with that, but he brings rayas why that kol would be okay. Again, I'm not going to go into any of the details, but some of the temanim, another way to blow is some of the temanim will blow it this way. Starting out very low and loud and loud and loud and loud and louder. And in fact, that's the way they blow in today. They blow in Amsterdam. And my suspicion is, I don't know for sure, the Ramchal spent a lot of time in Amsterdam before he went to Israel. So that may have been the influence of the Ramchal. I don't know. That's just, again, a suspicion. So those are 3 different ways that the tekiah is blown.
Okay, now what about the length of the tekiah? I know that's something that you discuss in here, how long a tekiah is supposed to be.
The tekiah is supposed to be as long as whatever comes in between. Meaning, if you have, let's say, a Shevarim teruah, the tekiah, the length of the tekiah has to equal the Shevarim and teruah together. Plus, again, getting to really nitty-gritty details, if you go according to the Chaznish, it would be slightly shorter. The Chaznish Shevarim teruah would be the teruah comes straight out of the Shevarim, was slightly shorter than a Shevarim teruah with neshima achas, meaning one breath. Neshima achas means 2 kolos with one slight breath in between. The shtei nishimas means it's actually 2 kolos with 1 breath in between the shorm and teruah, and that would be then blown slightly longer than than without the breath. The timing is all really up to the Baal Tekia. Rav David Feinstein, Zecher Tzaddik B'Kodesh L'Bracha, has standard times, which I've mentioned, but it also really minimal times, but also depends on the Baal Tekia himself. So my suggestion is that the Baal Tekia should time himself. You have one extra best Baal Tekia I heard lives in Beitar Elit. He starts blowing it right after Shivas B'Tamas. You have all that time. Stop practicing. Time yourself. But I'm not in favor of stopwatches on the bima. Kind of, I don't know. It's not really. Personally, think it's disrespectful. I think a good Baal Tekia should practice, and that's part of the practice. Not just the practicing the kolos, but practicing the timing of the kolos. And there are a number of eitzes I bring down in the Sefer from some of the gedolim, either tapping your foot, tapping your finger, counting aleph, beis, gimel, dalet in your head. The eitzah that I use, and again I mentioned in the Sefer, the eitzah that I use is to blow as you're blowing the tekiah, to blow the shvar and teruah in your head, or to blow the shvarim in your head, and that it works every time.
Wow. Okay, so now another for a couple pages here, you go on discussing tekiah complications, as you call it. I don't know if that's something you want to mention. Any particular? There's a couple of different things you mentioned: halachos, instances, stories you relate.
Yeah, some various stories. A stop in between. If it wavers too much. Those kinds of things. Stories. I'm not sure about the tekiah. I don't remember if I brought any stories on tekiah mistakes, but no, I don't have any stories on tekiah mistakes. But the complications are interesting and can get technical, and then of course it depends when the mistake is made. The mistake is made before Shemoneh Esrei, if it's made during a silent Shemoneh Esrei during Chazaras HaShatz, or if it's made the last 30 or 40 kolos after davening. So that all depends whether one has to do it over or not. Okay.
Now, tekiah gedolah. When is the tekiah gedolah blown, and is there a specific length for the tekiah gedolah?
No, there are various Minhagim. Where I blow in Kalas Shurin, it's after every 30 kolos. You blow tekiah gedolah again, and I think the reason for that is that the original minhag was to blow 30 kolos and then the tekiah gedolah, and as they added on 30 and after Shemoneh Esrei, and 30 again after Anim Zemiros, since doing 30, since the original 30 had a tekiah gedolah, each set of 30 has a tekiah gedolah. That's one minhag. Another minhag is to have tekiah gedolah at the end after all 100 kolos are blown. That's the other minhag. The Sephardim, the Mizrach, also blows something called a teruah gedolah. It is, although Rav Mustafi in his Sefer very clearly explains the reason why, if you're on the other side of the fence, it's not correct, and all the literature and all the on the Western European poskim hold very much against doing the teruah gedolah. Again, we discussed that in detail in the Sefer.
You actually relate a personal story with Rav Shimon Schwab. I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, that's it's to my I wouldn't say embarrassment, but it's a musa haskel. And when I'm very close also with Rabbi Erlanger, the Mashgiach Ruchni in the Mir here in Brooklyn, and he loved the story. It was probably the first year I blew as the Baal Tekia in Kalvas Shurim, and after the last call, I blew an extremely long tekiah gedolah, really, really long. And the second I stopped, I was, Rosh was the Baal Makri. The second I stopped, and I was very close with him, and therefore it was a father-son relationship, and therefore he felt very comfortable. He turned to me and told me off and said, "What are you trying to do? Show everybody how good you can blow?" And that was a musahaskim. And it's one of the things that Rosh was talked about, and is using he called it the Amud Yitzhahara, to use the Amud or public learning of anything in public, anything done before the tzibur for one's own personal aggrandizement. Like somebody has a good voice, singing out the Birchas Torah, especially during the week, singing them all out, or maybe not in the tradition, and they can make chazaras out of it, or during a week making a Chazaras HaShatz during the. Those are just two examples. But important person to learn not to use their Rebbeinu Shloim's chafetz and the Rebbeinu Shloim's things, davening and all other things, using a drasha to show how smart I am, and to take that attitude. So that was a musahaskel I learned, and although it may be to my embarrassment, but I think it's important, especially when I asked the story. The Shwadran has a similar story like that when he was first in Subatke Yeshiva. Again, but he told the story again, maybe to his embarrassment, but to convey a very important Dvar Musar. So that's why I included it in the Sefer.
Okay, yeah, it definitely. I read it and definitely was, interesting to see. Okay, so let me turn to the Shevarim. So what are the different Minhagim of the structure of Shevarim?
Okay, let me explain. This is not in the Sefer. It'll be in the next edition. Baruch Hashem, it's selling very well. So maybe insert the next one. You have to remember the famous machlokes between Rashi and other Rishonim as to what is the teruah. According to Rashi, that's is known as the first shita in Shulchan Aruch. The first shita, the teruah is 3 blips. According to Rashi, that would be the teruah. According to most other Rishonim, and which is the accepted minhag today, the teruah is 9 teruahs, 9 blips. The problem is, consider Rashi was considered shita. It's not something that, you have to consider it. All shitas you have to consider. So therefore, in what you asked me before about the length of the tekiah, so technically, according to Rashi, a tekiah, the 3 blip tekiah for that would be enough for tekiah. Therefore, the Shevarim, our Shevarim, the way we blow the Shevarim today, most predominant way to blow each shever could potentially be considered a tekiah according to the sheet of Rashi. So therefore, many minhagim have developed to the as far as how the Shevarim is blown. It probably has the most different ways of blowing, and we go through all of them in the Sefer. So the common way, or the plain way, although nothing's plain, but is 3 or like this. Straight through us. To Shevarim. Many poskim hold that because of this problem, first and foremost, the most vocal is Moshe Sternbuch in Chuvas and Chuvas Minhagos, and also in this earlier Sefer, Modi Balacha, says that that's a problem. and because of Rosh Hashanah. So many ways have developed. There's the teruah, and there's the teruah. There's the utu. There's the and then there's something called the tuti, which I saw in one of the Sefarim. It's mentioned. All many different kinds of ways to blow the shofar. Now, at this point, I want to make it very clear. My mission here is not to have everybody blow every single minhag that there is on Rosh Hashanah. I think it's very important. People should keep their own minhagim. And in especially today's post-COVID world, where there's been such a turmoil in even before that, and moving of neighborhoods, total uprooting of neighborhoods from one place to another, implosion of some neighborhoods, people moving to different places, and the trend even started before that of people going to different places, accepting minhagim, more general minhagim. It's very important. Minhagim is the spice of Klal Yisrael, and we're losing that. And so I think it's important to keep the minhagim. And that's the reason why I've done this, to present all the different minhagim. And it's very important for people to unfortunately, we live in America, Galus America, and again, especially post-COVID, we're beginning to lose all that. People are beginning to lose their own minhagim, except maybe in Chassidish Welt. That too, we have mixing of the different Chassidish sects. Important to keep your own minhagim. Again, it's the flavor and spice of Klal Yisrael.
Okay, so all those that you blew and that you were just talking about, you mentioned in the Sefer among with others, and like you mentioned the basic halacha, you write out the sound and then you discuss it with halachas, other things. So what about the next part about Shevarim would be the spacing between each of the three sounds in the Shevarim?
Shevarim, it has to be a minimal space, absolute minimal space. If you take a breath in between, it basically invalidates. Maybe according to one posek, maybe not. Again, we discussed in the Sefer. Unfortunately, I don't remember the whole Sefer by heart. But that would invalidate the Shevarim.
Okay. So listen. I'll mention it already. I'll mention it again later. There'll be a link in the show's notes to purchase the Sefer. Anyone interested, and it is available, like I said, locally in Sefarim stores. So the Sefer is a lot more comprehensive than this podcast is, except the podcast is offering the sounds of the sounds. Okay, now to teruah. So what are the minhagim of the structure and the sounds of the teruah?
Teruah is as I said, the Shevarim has the most differences. There are two very basic different minhagim from the teruah, and that's the one again the Western European, Eastern European minhag is as we mentioned is the nine very rapid blips. However, the minhag it's actually a misnomer. They call it the Tekias Shofar. It's not that. It's blown in Frankfurt, blown in Cologne, many of the cities in Germany, not in southern Germany where my father was from. It's called the Kol HaMizrash. Kol HaMizrash is blown in many kehillas in Germany, but it is also the minhag of the Eda Mizrach. It's the minhag of the Teimanim, and that's to blow it this way. It's more of a waving, continual sound. Again, it's called Kol HaMizrash. Now, the Teimanim, that way is blown with the using the diaphragm. The Teimanim actually blow it similar, but they do it blowing the tongue, using the tongue, ungulating the tongue. and I'm sitting down. That's why it's not. I didn't come out that well. But those are the two basic minhagim of blowing a teruah: the 9 blips, the kol hamisrash, and the differences in way you blow the kol hamisrash. But I must include, and again we mentioned in the Sefer, as Sternbach mentions, a lot of people like to blow the many gedolah were makbid. Shlomo Zalman, Rabbi Yashiv, were all makbid to hear the kol hamisrash afterwards. They had a Baal tekiah come to their home to blow the set of tekias with the kol hamisrash. But I must say, and Rav Moshe Sternbach makes it very clear, it's not blown. It's blown by blowing a tekiah and shaking the shofar. It's not done that way. As Rav Moshe Sternbach writes, all it is a shaky tekiah. You have to learn how to do it. If you want to do it right, you have to learn how to do it. Rav Shlomo Zalman had a Taimani come to his house to blow it. So if you want to learn how to blow it, call me up, and I'm more than happy to. If I have the time, I'm more than happy to try to teach people how to do it.
How do you blow it in Kal Das Yeshurun?
I blow it with the diaphragm and checking it up and down. And I learned by just watching my predecessor how he did it, and it took a while. It took a while to get it, but eventually I got it.
Now, what about the length of the teruah?
Again, the teruah has to be as long as the teruah is 9 blips. So however long it is, you blow the tekiah. It's a few seconds. It's just a couple of seconds, not more than that. The kol hamisrash is a little bit longer because it's more of a continual type of kol.
Okay. Now, again, as with tekiah and Shevarim and teruah, there's a lot more different various circumstances and situations and halachos that are discussed in the Sefer that I'll leave for anyone interested to read the Sefer that we won't discuss here. Now, the next thing would be, so you discuss in the Sefer teruah gedolah and then Shevarim teruah.
Right. The teruah gedolah is a question. The main thing, one of the main reasons that the poskim are against it is because here's the question. The question is, teruah gedolah is mentioned mentioned by the Gaonim. It's mentioned earlier than the tekiah gedolah. Tekiah gedolah was accepted more by the Rishonim. So why they're more against the teruah gedolah than the tekiah gedolah, which comes from the Rishonim. The problem with the teruah gedolah is not the sound itself, is that it's einam in a minyan. It's extra. It's not necessary. And then you come into the shaila of blowing unnecessary kolos, which is a problem which the post can bring down, which we talk about also in the Sefer. So therefore, it's discouraged by the Mishbura, the Minhagim mentions it. Mishbura is against it, and most of the Western European Litvish, Eastern European poskim are very much against it. As I mentioned, Mustafi and the Eda Mizrach poskim are in favor of it, again because it's something that comes from the Gaonim. But the reason, as I mentioned, the non Eda Mizrach are against blowing it for that reason.
Yeah. So before we move on to Shevarim teruah, I just realized about teruah gedolah. I guess you should clarify what exactly is teruah gedolah. When is it blown?
Teruah gedolah is a very, very long teruah, and it's blown at the end after depending on how many you blow. Like if the minhag of 41, that last one is teruah gedolah. 71 is the last one is the teruah gedolah, or 101, the last one is a teruah gedolah. So it's blown at the end, and blown it's blown as a simon that people should go home and not forget, and not because they're going home. As we mentioned, it's a simcha, so people are having a festive meal, that they should take that teruah gedolah home with them, that they shouldn't forget the whole idea of Rosh Hashanah, which is a beautiful thought. But again, the poskim are against it because it's not part of the it's not part of the sets of tekias that we blow.
Okay. Now the last one that we'll discuss before we get on to the actual shofar is Shevarim teruah.
Shevarim teruah is in the Shema. There's two Minhagim. The Shemoneh Esrei was the original Minhagim of the Rishonim. And later in history, the later Rishonim, let me put it this way: Shevarim teruah with Shemoneh Esrei was the original minhag. The later Rishonim were more against that and felt that it should be with one neshima with no break in between. So that's discussed again. We discussed it in the Sefer, the different shittas, and so the Shevarim teruah with two neshimas is a little bit longer. So most places today, the ikar is the shema achas. So what they'll do is they'll blow the shema achas during the first 30 tekias the miyushav, and they'll blow the shema achas during Shemoneh Esrei, Chazaras HaShatz, or silent Shemoneh Esrei, and then they'll blow shtei neshimas afterwards. There are many other places that do it the other way around. In Frankfurt, where I blow, and many other shuls that do it the other way around, where shtei neshimas is more important, is the ikar, and the shema achas is blowing afterwards, after Shemoneh Esrei, after Chazaras HaShatz. And again, this is all based on Rishonim.
Okay, so now we can move on to the shofar, the actual shofar itself. So this is something you discuss at length in the Sefer, the kashrus of the shofar and the kashrus of Shofaros today, and also which animals the shofar can come from. And so I guess we should split it up. I don't know if you want to first discuss the kashrus of the shofar.
Yeah, the kashrus. I play a game when I go to a storm store. How soon, I'll go through right now, this time of year, they'll have hundreds, some stores have hundreds of Shofaros. The later in the season you go, the less obviously they sell. And the game is, how fast am I going to find one that's not kosher? I think last year, 2 years ago, I broke my record. The first one I picked up was cracked. And many Shofaros, even with the hechsher, even with the holograph, which is now on many Shofaros, the holograph stamp of kashrus, you'll find Shofaros with cracks. I met somebody a while ago. He showed me the shofar he had recently got for a brand new shofar. Picked it up on the end. Sure enough, there was a crack. So first thing is be aware of the kashrus of Shofaros, because and frightening as it may be, it may very well be that people are blowing Shofaros on Yontif with Shofaros which are not kosher. So not only is the shofar not kosher, but the people who listen are not yotze. So a good practice is to show the shofar to your Rav, if he's familiar with those halachos, and to show a crack and to see if there's differences between a widthwise crack or a lengthwise crack, whether they have to check for chips on the mouthpiece, all different degrees of cracks. So it's really, really important to check to make sure your shofar is kosher. Other things, there are some shofar factories actually run by Goyim, which claim they have hechsherim, and they dip the shofaros in, people don't like this, people have objections to the smell. The barrel of the shofar can smell, especially after many years of blowing into it. It can have an odor. So people don't like it, so they'll dip the shofar in polyethylene. An expert can actually tell a difference, but it's polyethylene, not so it doesn't smell. But my answer to that is you have to blow the shofar, not smell it. You have to be careful. So you have to be very careful, make sure it has a proper hechsher. Again, we mentioned that in the Sefer. haskamos for that as well, and make sure your shofar is kosher. If you're not familiar with halachos, show it to your Baal Makri, who's I'm assuming is the Rav. If you want to bring it to Washington Heights and show it to me, I'm more than happy to look at it, or contact me. I will. They're experts in numerous neighborhoods, experts who can actually you can look at it, so you don't have to schlep all the way to Washington Heights.
Okay, so then there's other various parts of different kashrus related issues. They're all in the Sefer, people can see them if you want to mention. But some general things is how long does the shofar have to be and how thick?
There is no limit to length, although there is one posek who says that a shofar shouldn't be more than a meter, but we don't really hold like him. It can be as long as you want. The kiddush, again, it's a bit controversial. The kiddush, we talk about that in the Sefer as well. The kiddush can be up to 50 centimeters long, so which is 60 centimeters. I have one here which is I think 62 centimeters long. So the length doesn't matter, the thickness doesn't matter, as long as it's not cracked and it can blow it. The preeminent horn to use is that of an ayil. Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky is in the Halachos, but he didn't write. Rabbi Kleinman did a masterful job in the Halachos, a tremendous job in the entire series Halachos. In fact, I spoke to Shmuel Kamenetsky about it, and he's just amazed at the work. He's amazed that his father spent so much time going over it and commenting on it. And in there, Rav Shmuel talks about since the ayil, the ram's one, is so readily available, there's really no excuse not to use it. Hey, people want to be sticky and use it's kosher, like a gemsbach or a springbach or all kinds of bachs, all kinds of antelopes that for African antelopes or antelopes in the Midwest, the pronged horn antelope, all kinds of Shofaros, horns that Shofaros can be made, but it's not right nowadays. It's not preeminent. Preeminent is to why not use an ayil? Ayil reminds us of a Tekias Yitzchak as one of the reasons that brought down by the Tzadigon. Why we have such trouble today in being with kind mitzvahs. Why not do it this one we can do it in a preeminent way and do it with a ram slaughter. There was one story which I heard, which I mentioned in the Sefer. There was a fellow in South Africa who in the last minute it couldn't get it out with a regular ayil, but he was able to use it. He used I believe the gemsbach, and it blew beautifully with it. But it's kosher. Everybody was young to the mitzvah, but and he couldn't do it with the ayil. But it's best to do it with the ayil. So I have here. I have a whole collection, which I take along with me when I speak in schools and yeshivas, and I've spoken in kollel and high schools and Beis Yaakov. So I have here a gemsbach, and this is how it sounds. I'm not sure how it will carry over on the mic. That's a gemsbach. I have a sable here. Sable also is there. This is I guess it's at least 2 feet long. Sable, and then I have here something, a third one, a duad, it's spelled AOUDAD ram. It's huge. I guess it's almost 3 feet long, huge, curved. Very, very long. Actually, I did some research on the duad ram, and scientifically, it's called a ram, but it may be actually a mix between a goat and ram. Again, I think I found out all that information after the Sefer was published, and so that will be in the next edition of the Sefer. There are many different kinds of Shofaros. There's also something called a springbok, which I have a question on, and that is not in the Sefer. Rabbi Asher Weiss Paskin wrote a tshuva on it. It does not appear in his tshuva Sforim. To be quite frank, how should I put this? Ba'aniyas dati, again, Rabbi Asher Weiss is a tremendous posek. I had some questions on that tshuva, and I hope to be able to ask them when I had to get a chance to meet him. Hope to be able to ask them a question. Again, that tshuva is not published at the moment, at least.
Okay, so those were the different sounds. I don't know how clear they came across. Yeah, like I said, the mic and the computer and the Zoom. I don't know how we're doing this in Zoom, how clear it came across, but those are the sounds, and anyone interested can hear them more. They definitely sound different, though. They definitely do. They definitely sound different, and you do discuss in the Sefer the different order of preference. As you say, the ayil is still the preference, but you mentioned them. You also have a pretty long, interesting discussion you go through about the kudu, right? You do have it here, temanim, whether they should use it, they shouldn't.
Right. There's a machlokas today. Rabbi Vadia and Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef have my grandchildren and son have a close relationship with him. They live there. He is their neighbor in Yerushalayim. He very clearly in Yabia Omer in Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef's Sefer paskins that it should not be used. The kudu should not be used. Rav Ratzabi, who is the Rosh of Temanim and Mosid of Temanim, which is interestingly enough headquartered in Bnei Brak, wrote Shuva defending the use of the kudu, explains why the kudu came about, why it's used, a number of reasons, and again defends it, but does recognize that the big question is because the Rambam paskins that only an ayil should be used, and the Temanim and the Edom Mizrach normally only go according to the Rambam. So the big question is, if the Rambam paskins that you should use the ayil, why is it that they're using the kudu? So Rav Sabi also gives in a little bit with regard to that use, and has a shara which we talk about in the Sefer.
Okay, now you also have the rest of this chapter has a couple unusual shofar situations. You even have a Siamese Shofaros. Yeah, that jumped out at me. The story. They have a couple of other interesting ones.
Yeah, that I have. I have a few Siamese. They're actually like Siamese twins stuck together. And I used to go occasionally to Rav David Feinstein's famous Friday morning shiur, and the best way to get to Rav David was to push yourself up, as those who attended the shiur know, to push up right after the shiur and ask and fire away your shilas, which I did, and I showed it to him, and I asked him if it was made, this one was not made into a shofar, it was made into a shofar, would be kosher. He said, yeah, why not? And I asked the same question I asked for Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, and he said the same thing. Yeah, why not?
Okay, so then you have you discuss as well blowing the shofar. Who should be the Baal Tekia? You're obviously Baal Tekia, but you do discuss, right, the various halachos and things about who should be a Baal Tekia.
The Mishnah very clearly goes through the what type of person should be the Baal Tekia, and it's daunting, and I think any Baal Tekia should learn it very carefully before, remind himself of it if you haven't looked at it beforehand, and strive to be what the qualifications are. And I think that one of the greatest line is, I think the Belzer Rebbe again, we mentioned the Sefer. What machshavos should the Baal Tekia have? And he said, the Baal Tekia should remember all year round that he's the Baal Tekia. And that's very telling. And so I highly recommend anybody who's about to carefully go through that and remember all year round that you're the Baal Tekia. And I repeat to myself all the time, Zeit the Baal Tekia. I remember
that. Now, what about the Baal Makri?
Baal Makri, even more so, has to know how has to be a posek, has to know, it can't be a stamen of Elterine, person who's not familiar with halachos, has to be extremely familiar with the halachos and not just go over the halachos the day before Yontif. Again, it's for the Baal Makri to start preparing. Certainly, maybe Asar B'Teves on Shivas B'Tamez, or to start right after Tisha B'Av to start going through all the halachos.
Okay,
and
so
don't have to buy the Sefer. I wrote some of the other Svarim and go through all the halachos in Lashon HaKodesh.
Okay, so something else that's not the actual blowing, but something that's very negea that comes up is kiddush, eating before davening. You do discuss this pretty much at length in here, and this is a very relevant topic, I'm sure, for a lot of people, a lot of listeners.
That is the most famous. I'm giving a talk in 2 weeks on famous shofar debates, and that is the number one debate with regard to the halachos of Tekias Shofar, eating before Tekias Shofar or not. The original minhag was not to eat, just like any other other mitzvahs, Esrei and so forth. But over the last 200 years, maybe, because davening became much longer, especially in yeshiva davening, and it became difficult for people to last till 3 o'clock in the afternoon without making kiddush. So the minhag was to start to make a hefsek before Tekias Shofar and eat. Again, the reasons are why at that point. Reasons I believe, if I remember correctly, we talk about. There's the most famous battle between Rav Henkin and Rav Aaron, and we talk about it in the Sefer. It's mentioned in the Sefer of Chuvas of Rav Henkin. The Shakla B'Tarya between Rav Henkin and Rav Gifter. The letters back and forth are in the Sefer and the Machtavam of Rav Henkin. Rav Henkin was stark against eating any type of kiddush before Tekias Shofar, and he used to call up Rav Aaron every year, but he used to call up Rav Aaron and said, "You're doing wrong. The yeshiva is doing wrong in making kiddush before Tekias Shofar." He permitted kiddush after the first 30 tekiyas for someone who was shvach or can't make it. But there are every single Shuva Sefer that discusses Hilchos Tekias Shofar talks about it. It's probably the most debated issue, and again, we discuss it in great detail. That is probably the biggest shofar debate that exists with regard to Tekias Shofar. And by the way, if you do make, I'm not saying yay. That's for you to ask Shaila, just the gedolim, Yashiv, from Zalman, Chaim, all the great gedolim did not, even though they permitted, and in the Minhagim where they davened, people may have made kiddush, they personally did not, and that's recorded, and I have my haskamos with that again. Where that's recorded. But if you do, there is a shit. So that doesn't mean sit down and have a kiddush from Sholem and kugel and Sholem and all good zachen. The shia given is a beitza to eat them and make kiddush and eat them out of the beitza, and that's it. Which Yosef talks about. They all talk about it, and that's the minimum shia. So if you're gonna do it, maybe a ragalach or 2 ragalach, but not to eat a huge piece of 7-layer cake or 10 regalach and so forth. Again, I'm not making this up. This is it's all written, all documented, and again, we have all Mamakamas mentioned.
So no meat boards by kiddush by Rosh Hashanah before
no, absolutely not.
Yeah. Okay. So right. So like Bris Leo of Rav Henkin. So that's in Chelik Aleph. If anyone interested can see it in there. They printed the letter from Rav Gifter to Rav Henkin. Rav Henkin, like you said, famously had he would call up Rav Aaron. He had this famous opposition to this. The other thing that's not like just a minhag kind of thing is when do it. Now today we have like a call it Ashkenaz and Sefer, but the one that is blowing. When is it blown during Shemoneh Esrei, during Shemoneh Esrei, or Chazaras HaShatz?
Yeah, that's another one of the other great debates as to when to do it. Questionable about doing it during Shemoneh Esrei. The contemporary poskim hold that if that is your minhag, certainly continue doing it. If you're starting a new shul, starting in a place, and again with the turmoil, people moving here, people moving there, new shuls are starting. The poskim say it's better not to do it just during Chazaras HaShatz. It's clear that the host can talk about it.
Okay, yeah. Another thing I know that comes up, maybe you want to mention, we discussed this before, is like a hefsek during Chazaras HaShatz, though. Right? Could there be talking? Maybe he's not even supposed to learn them.
No, absolutely not. Certainly not. Certainly not between the Tekias Yushuv and the Tekias Umad. In that spot, then you have a problem with brachas, because then you've been mafsik and you made the bracha on the first set, and then the bracha still extends to the ones during Shemoneh Esrei, whether it's silent Shemoneh Esrei or repetition of Shemoneh Esrei. So you made a hefsek, talking in between, but also during talking in between the post can talk about it between the first tekias and the last tekias, and Geli's Zechat Tzaddik Bracha. He was very makbid even after Chazaras HaShatz was finished, where some say that it's okay to talk before the last 30 or 40. He was very makbid, and he used to signal me with his fingers, like snapping fingers together, to remind me that the tekias after Shemoneh Esrei, after Musaf, have to be neshima achas. So best thing is not to be mafsik. Not to be mafsik with learning also, by the way, if it's not, has not to do with Tekias Shofar. I know Belsky talks about it. He talks about, okay, if the Baal Tefillah is being Minhagim and making singing long nigunim, whether to learn in between. He says it's okay. Maybe things not related to Tekias Shofar, but the other poskim will say that you can't, if you're going to learn, it has to be something that's related to Tekias Shofar. Otherwise, it's a hefsek. You're being mafsik in the mitzvah. Clearly mentioned in poskim. Again, we mentioned that in the Sefer.
Okay, yeah, and there's a lot more mentioned here that we're discussing. Of course, there's a big lengthy chapter, some of what we mentioned with the kiddush, but entitled before Tekias Shofar. There's a very long chapter you have during Tekias Shofar, then you have after Tekias Shofar. So there's a lot here. Then you have some additional notes, other comments, and there's a few more, two even more ending chapters with some of the appendices in here. So I don't know if there's anything there that you wanted to mention before I have some final general questions. Is there anything from there in particular that you wanted to mention, or no?
I think we touched on, there's a lot more there. We touched on a lot of the salient points.
Yeah, exactly. So anyone interested, there's a lot we've already gone long enough. Anyone interested can see the Sefer. Like I said, there'll be a link and find out. Let me just ask you. You have a number of haskamos in here. If you want to say anything about the haskamos, where you got the haskamos from?
Certainly, the Rabbi in Washington Heights of Montel. He doesn't give us comments. It's because of the letter, but I've written from. Unfortunately, I could not get a letter from my Rosh Yeshiva, the Novi Mitzvah Rebbe, but I do have the letters from the current Rebbe, his sons, the Novi Mitzvah Rebbe of Lakewood, the Novi Mitzvah Rebbe of Borough Park. I have a letter from Rabbi Leff, who's we're close to. My wife is the Talmida of him when she was in Cleveland, when he started out in Cleveland. I have a letter from Diane Dunner. That's the famous Aaron David's Dunner. His brother is a Diane in Bnei Brak, who we're very friendly with, very close with. And then my shmugar is a Rav in Baltimore, a haskamos from him as well. I've got since the Sefer came out, I got a call from one of the Yonim in Lakewood, unsolicited, and after the call, I ended it with, I said, Hashem, you'll give me a letter for the next version.
Okay, very good. So finally, just as a final question, so who would you say the Sefer is geared towards? Is it geared towards a Tekia, Baal Makri, and that type of thing, or is it meant for even just anybody interested in learning more about Shefer, Halachos, Minhagim?
Anybody who wants to know the depth of the mitzvah, to be clear, even if you're not a Baal Tekia, you're Mekayim the mitzvah better by knowing the nitty-gritty details. You buy an esrog, yeah, you can go to the store and just buy one. But if you in the halachos, in the ayin, how esrog should look, how a lulav should look, how hadassim and a rubber should look, it makes the mitzvah. It brings greater value and greater weight to being the kind of mitzvah.
Okay, so that's I will post a link. Anyone interested can purchase the book and all the Sefer. Also, it is available, like I said, locally in Svarim stores. Anyone can purchase it that way. And with that, thank you very much, Bentzion, for joining me. And I want to wish everyone a good Kiddush.
And be the kind of mitzvah properly.